r/AskReddit. What celebrities have you encountered that were either really nice or really horrible? I ran into Adam Sandler outside of a Planet Fitness in Brooklyn in early 2016. As I was leaving the Planet Fitness, it looked like he was walking in. We made eye contact, so I stopped and held the door for him. He got to the door and stopped right before he walked through in one of those fake poses that little kids make when you tell them to freeze. I stood there holding the door, plenty confused. For about 5 seconds, we just stood there, him, motionless, and I, standing there holding the door. Finally, he turned his head and said in the stereotypical Adam Sandler voice, who we kidding? I'm not going in there. Giant grin on his face. We both laughed, and then he continued down the street. Awesome. I met him down in Nantucket one summer a few years ago. I had no money, and so he bought me and my friends a pizza and shared it with us. Probably the greatest moment of my life. He was in my town in New York shooting something for Netflix a few years ago. When he was done for the day, he went down to the local park and started playing pickup games of basketball with people. I met John Candy on a plane when I was a little kid while traveling with my family. He was a big man. He had the whole row to himself in front of us with the armrest up between seats so he could be more comfortable. The stewardesses were blocking anyone from coming up and bothering him, even though they themselves were not exactly leaving him alone, what with talking to him constantly and laughing at his enjoyable banter the whole trip. At some point he got up to go to the bathroom. When he came back, he looked at me, pretended to do a double take, like he was surprised, and said, "Hey, you're the quietest kid ever, don't you talk?" The way he said it was so friendly that I just smiled and giggled. Then he had a pleasant conversation with my parents, who had been dying to talk to him the entire flight, but were too polite to bother him. Not even 2 weeks later we heard he had passed. My mom spotted Robin Williams once, and she went up to him and asked if she could get a quick photo. She didn't realize he was there in the middle or about to do something with the Make-A-Wish Foundation, so she waited until they were done around 20 to 30 minutes later, and then a bunch of the kids and people wanted photos with him. He made it a point to stick around and told his staff, "I think that woman wanted a photo," and made sure she got it. Mom was thrilled. He was such a humble, nice dude. I was working in a little boutique store in Seattle with my girlfriend, and it was a particularly slow day when all of a sudden Robin Williams walks through the door. He was the only one in the store and my girlfriend didn't know who he was. We left him alone, and when he came up to purchase his things, he started barking at my Boston Terrier in a cute way. It scared the crap out of my Boston Terrier and he started barking back at Robin. He was so genuine and nice, and I really do remember how hairy his arms were. For some reason, that really stuck out. He walked out the door and instantly was surrounded by a bunch of tourists trying to take pictures of him. He put his bags in the back of his Mini Cooper and drove off. He bought a little piece of artwork and 3 Gorin Brothers hats. I met Paul Rudd on a flight from New York, sat next to him on the plane. My buddy leaned over and told me that he wanted to compliment him on this band shirt he wore when making Clueless, but he didn't want it to be weird. So his solution was to write him a note and slip it to him, lol. So he does this, and Paul just gets this nervous look on his face, opens the note and reads it. Starts cracking up laughing, leaned over to us and said, "Best note ever." He then told us the whole story of the shirt, how he fought with the costume dept about it, because it was the shirt he wore to set that day. We talked the whole flight. Dude was super cool. Oh, this makes me so happy. I saw his name and almost didn't read on because I'd be so upset if he wasn't nice. My mom and sister met The Rock when he was still a wrestler. They had a couple car seats and tons of bags, having a hell of a time getting off the plane, and people were waiting, and then this massive guy offered to carry some things for them, and they happily took the help. He grabbed some bags and held the baby carrier with my niece in it and helped them off the plane and left. After, people kept going up to them asking how they knew The Rock, and they were very confused until someone explained who he was. Everything I ever hear about him, he's super cool. He did a rap from Moana with some dude interviewing him for the guy's kids, because the guy's kids were massive Moana fans. I reckon he's so nice that on the aeroplane, I bet you, he let the person next to him have the armrest. He probably thought this isn't the Rock's elbow room, this is the people's elbow room. I met the St. Bernard dog from Beethoven at Planet Hollywood when I was a kid. Seemed like a pretty nice dog in person. Met Dave Chappelle a few years back. Long story short, a friend of a friend got me and two friends into an after party. We were sitting at the bar when his manager offered us some shots. We talked with his manager for a while. Then Dave sat down near us. Dave was kind of sitting by himself, and he looks over at us and goes, "What's going on, fellas?" And we talked to him for about an hour. We thanked him for coming to our town, talked about music, sports, all kinds of stuff. Super cool dude. One of my favorite memories. What going on, fellas? I read that in his voice. It's impossible not to. I met Vin Diesel at a truck stop diner when I was a kid. It was like 4 in the morning and me, my grandpa and Vin and his friend were the only ones in the diner, and we ended up sat at the table next to them. Vin and a friend were getting ready to go on some fishing trip, which was made obvious by the clothes they were wearing. My grandpa struck up a conversation about fishing with him, completely oblivious to who he was. He was a really nice guy and apparently knew a great deal about fishing techniques. I was a bit geeked out and didn't say much or contribute to the conversation, but I spent the next hour of our road trip explaining to my grandpa who Vin Diesel was and why it was a huge deal we just met him. I bet for Vin it was probably refreshing to have a casual conversation with someone about a personal hobby that didn't center around his celebrity status. Our family friend knew a guy who ran into Drake at a social gathering in Toronto. Apparently this guy had no idea who Drake actually was, so he simply strikes up a conversation and asks him what he does for a living. Drake was really refreshed to know that some 50-year-old guy had no idea who he was and just had a normal human conversation with him. I served Daniel Radcliffe his dessert at an event and tripped and spilled some of it on him, probably due to seeing that I was serving Daniel Radcliffe, and he stood up and started apologizing profusely to me. Was very sweet and asking if I was okay. The correct British response. I like how fame never seemed to give him a big head. From what I understand, fame almost destroyed him. The stress of being Harry Potter and the uncertainty as the film series ended contributed to a fairly serious drinking problem. I was happy to learn that he's been sober since 2010. More power to him. When I was a teenager, I met Neil Armstrong at a retirement ceremony that my dad brought me to. It was at a museum, and it was a private event. There was time for everyone to wander the museum, and my dad saw Mr. Armstrong looking at one of the planes that my dad helped design. Nobody else around. They struck up a conversation and Neil asked me questions about what I was studying and how I felt about the work my dad did. My dad worked on classified planes when I was much younger. He seemed like such a gentle guy to me. A bunch of other men suddenly joined us and started asking him for autographs, which he declined. It seemed to snap him out of his happy mood, and he kind of shut down and walked away. At that time I thought he was a bit of a jerk for not saying goodbye or anything, but I recently read about the hard time he had with fame, and I guess it makes sense. Sounds like he's really nice, but overwhelmed with the accidental stardom. I don't blame him. I'd be the same way after years of that. Don't you mean accidental moondom? I met Buzz Aldrin and have a good story. I met him in 2009 and 2013. At the 2013 meeting, I said, I met you before in 2009, and he said, what took you so long to come back? Nice couple of people to have met, particularly Buzz Aldrin. Always going to be a special person in history, so you're a lucky person. My husband and I were wandering around Philly a few years ago, and Don Cheadle was walking toward us. We both stopped and turned as we watched him go by. After he passed us, he turned around with a big smile and waved/winked. I just thought that was pretty cool. Was a server for Tom Cruise. Pretty cool dude, to be honest. Was a bit out of touch, but that's to be expected. The funny part was he didn't know what he could order off of our menu, so he had to call his nutritionist to find out what to get. Ended up getting fried chicken. Fried chicken seems like an odd choice after consulting a nutritionist. This was not exactly high-end dining. I believe the words were, "Duck it, get the chicken, and do some extra cardio tonight." Used to do delivery runs for a catering company, and we would get a lot of celebrities at the airport that ordered from us. Johnny Depp was the only one I ever saw face to face. Dude pulled a wadded up bill from his pocket and tossed it at me. I thought it was cool I got a tip directly from him at all, but once I had it all unwadded it was $100 bill. He's really a total sweetheart. I saw him at a few shows. He plays guitar with Alice Cooper, and after the set ended he leaned down from the stage to give me a hug. Smiling the whole time. I greeted him with Captain Jack. And he laughed, even though I was just a kid. Nicest dude. I met Jim Carrey when I was like 11 at a party my parents attended. I couldn't stop staring at him. He was behaving so normal, and then when he noticed me staring he did a mask facial expression and started staring at me. He's a genuinely funny guy and probably has the purest of heart. Bumped into Gordon Ramsay in the lift in a hotel in Hong Kong. He was very friendly. We didn't talk to him or ask for a picture. I just blurted out, "You're Gordon Ramsay." And he acknowledged and smiled. He insisted on us going first because we had our suitcases with us, wished us a nice day, said bye several times when we saw him in the lobby again. Very friendly. Got the chance to meet him a few years back, and he really is a pretty nice guy. Just has a low tolerance for bullshit.